Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist. I have degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, and a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy. In this video, I'm not seeking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Hello, welcome to Shadow Work Wednesday. Adric was first. So I've got him starred on my end. And he also says, I certainly don't know what it is. We're having to get a lot more into the philosophers for shadow work. We left Jung a long time ago. I mean, he circles back around here and there, but essentially we're into a lot of other philosophers to do this work. So Shadow Work Wednesday. Hi, Nina. Thank you for being here. It is called What is, and what is not, is not. Another way to say that is, it is what it is. But this all comes from Aristotle. Aristotle was the first one to say it. He just said it in such a difficult way. So I'm going to quote him so that you understand why we shorten what he said. But what he said is, to say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false. While to say of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not. So it is what it is. That makes so much more sense. Or what is, and what is not, is not. Hi, Leon. I don't know if I'll have a panel. I have a lot to get through, but it's possible. It's possible. Excuse me, and you might be good for the panel. All right, so why did Aristotle say this? Like this was actually an answer to a question. So somebody asked Aristotle, what is truth? And his response was that whole long to say of what is that it is not, and people who are listening to him were like, God, this guy just drives me nuts. You know what I mean? Aristotle, you're so wise. What is truth? And he babbles off something that sounds like nonsense, but essentially what it means is the truth. You will never find the truth in speaking of something about what it is not. Okay, so similarly, like if you keep telling someone all the things they can't do, like all you ever tell them is no, you can't do that, you can't do this, no, 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 no. It never tells them what they can do. So if you're a person who was only ever told no and rejected and all these things, no, can't do that, no, can't have that, no, 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 then you never know what you're actually allowed to do. Or like when we describe somebody, we turn it into a riddle if all we're saying is everything that the person is not. Right? Then we're just, there's a crowd of people and they're like, hey, go tell Maggie that it's time. And they're like, who's Maggie? Well, she's not a man. You see. You see how it turns into a riddle, right? So the thing is, though, if we only ever hear from people or think about what we're not, right? Like, you're not rich, you're not tall, you don't have long legs, I don't know, whatever it is, right? But people will tell us that, you're not the smart one, you're not the athletic one, you know what I mean? So we hear all these things and then we start to lie to ourselves, right? Through this like self-deprecating language with ourselves, or we just absorb harmful words from someone else, right? So we just internalize it But we also internalize things like propaganda when it has to do with us, dogma when we hear about it, we internalize it, especially if we heard a lot of no's as a child or we heard all about what we are not. But even in relationships, you can have relationships with people where they're like, you know, I'm not going to be in a committed relationship with you because you don't make $1 million a year or whatever. Okay, so if that's all we ever hear, that's all we internalize, that's the whole way that we talk to ourselves, you only know several ways, but not even all the ways that you are not, right? If we had to sit down and make a list of everything we're not, that is a super long list, right? Hi, AB Media. So if all we ever know is what we are not, then we don't know the truth of ourselves. So that harkens back to Aristotle, right? So what is the truth? Well, what is, and what is not, right? So I don't know what is if I only know what I am not. Hopefully that makes sense. I feel like I'm talking a little bit like Aristotle and going around in circles. Okay. So to determine the truth of yourself, right, to reach the full potential of being authentically you requires something called transcendence, right? But we can understand what the word means. Transcend, rise above, go beyond, right? So we have the dogma, the propaganda, the words, all these things we're told, everything that we're not and how we're not good enough and we're not worthy enough and we're, all this. We have to figure out a way to transcend, right? To rise above. So a lot about what we're going to talk about today is the philosophy. I'm not talking about there's a lot of love and light in the spiritual community. I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about the philosophy and when it came about and what does the philosophy mean. So transcendentalism, I have notes, by the way, is a philosophical, spiritual, and literary movement. So this was philosophy and literary, and there are spiritual components to it. So this is a movement that started in the late 1820s in the United States, interestingly enough. A core belief is the inherent goodness of people and nature, like at its core. Think about babies, you know what I mean? Like babies are not born evil and bad and all these things. So a thought of it is we're all like down deep, inherently good people. And nature in and of itself is inherently good. Okay. So that's like the core belief. Now, what they add on to that is that society and its institutions corrupt the purity of individual people. Okay, so people are at their best when they are self-reliant, they are independent. It's essentially when you get huge groups, big groups of people together, they all sort of start to rally around certain concepts that start become divisive and exclusionary and hateful. And then they start to corrupt individuals, in societies and collectives and groups and governments. It's only as healthy as the sickest person, and it spreads like a virus. Okay. So Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, literary geniuses, were two of the founders of Transcendentalism. And of course, I hear that it started in the 1820s, and I'm like, I know what was going on in the United States in the 1820s. So I looked it up, and so I want to read you some things that were said by Thoreau during this time. And I am going to use the word that starts with the N that was used for Black people during that time, because it's part of the quote. So hopefully no one finds offense. I'm quoting this person directly, and his intention also was not to be offensive. Okay, so Thoreau says, on the emancipation of the Negroes, language must be raked. The secrets of slaughterhouses and infamous holes that cannot front the day must be ransacked to tell what Negro slavery has been. These men, our benefactors, the producers of comfort and luxury for the civilized world. I am heartsick when I read how they came here and how they are kept here. Their caste was left out of the mind and out of the heart of their brothers. So then Frederick Douglass took up Emerson's term self-reliance. He was the first one to say self-reliance in advance to his readers. Okay, so this was during a period of time that the abolitionist movement was rising, and however, these philosophers and authors, you know, these literary people, did not deem themselves abolitionists. They felt like abolition was not far enough. So the basic tenet of transcendentalism is that every single person needs as much freedom as they can to grow to their fullest potential as they can. Okay, so having people who are enslaved was completely antithetical to that thought. So they wanted, you know, everybody needs to be freed, and everybody needs to be on the same playing field and given all the freedom possible. Okay, this was what transcendentalists feel, right? That if we look at the fact that everyone is born good, you know, they're inherently good, and everybody has potential, then everybody has to be free to move in whatever way necessary to reach their full potential of goodness, and that society's rules and laws and different things are what infect people. Okay, so Thoreau actually, his cabin at Walden Pond. So if you guys know Thoreau, he writes about Walden Pond. So his cabin at Walden Pond was actually a stop on the Underground Railroad. So he wasn't just talking the talk, he was walking the walk. Okay. Thoreau wrote Resistance to Civil Government in 1849. The government, Thoreau argues, is but an expedient by which we succeed in letting one another alone. So his view of the government was it should be a structure such that you leave people alone to grow, right? And if you guys ever saw my video that's on here, it's literally called Leave People Alone. So that's where that comes from. So what he says is the citizen has no duty to resign his conscience to the state, and may even have a duty to oppose immoral legislation such as that which supports slavery and war. So that was his, he was very outspoken. Okay. So, and I'm using what he was doing as the time transcendentalism was being created and was gathering momentum, and more people were joining. So he wrote that in 1849, was like, hey, if the government's going to do immoral crap, it's our duty to resist, to fight against it in whatever way possible. Hi, Lawrence Ross. Thanks for being in here. Then the fugitive slave law passed by the United States Congress in 1850. So this means that even if people were able to get away to the northern states, now they didn't get away, right? They had to come back. So Thoreau denounced the absurdity in Boston. There was a court hearing about this, right? So he's in Boston, and he says, trying a man to find out if he is not really a slave when the question has already been decided from eternity. He is a man. In his lecture on slavery of 1855, Emerson calls the original 1787 Constitution recognition of slavery a crime, and a moral law he holds is void. So any immoral law we don't have to follow. So although Thoreau advocated nonviolent action in that resistance to civil government, he later supported the violent actions of John Brown. Hopefully you guys know who he is, who killed unarmed pro-slavery settlers in Kansas, and in 1859 attacked the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry in Virginia. In a plea for Captain John Brown, so this was something Thoreau wrote, Thoreau portrays Brown as an angel of light and a transcendentalist. Whew, that was hard. Above all. And he says, a man has a perfect right to interfere by force with a slave holder. So we like the I like the transcendentalists. I like to try to do that as much as possible, to look at when big groups of people get together, they will coalesce around some idea, which that idea always creates division. Then it always becomes us and them. And those kind of things can lead to violence and really corrupt and immoral things. But individuals, if left to their own devices and being able to access everything they need to reach their potential, they definitely can reach their potential. All right. So, but transcendentalism, to transcend, to rise above, to go beyond. So above what? Beyond what? So one is the burdens of society, right? So the super strict laws, the way in which, the state or the country operates tells you about yourself. Again, tells you everything that you can't do and what you are not. Okay. This is what government tells us, what you can't do and what you are not. Right. And then occasionally it throws some rights in that are only interspersed for certain people. So it doesn't even apply to everybody. Right. Or they'll say it applies to everybody, but in practice, it doesn't apply to everybody. Okay. So number one, burdens of society. That's what we have to transcend, right? That's what we have to go beyond. That's what we have to rise above. And number two, limiting of human potential. So in this world, especially groups of people will try to limit the potential of others, especially if there is envy or jealousy or fear of some sort, or feeling like, those other people don't deserve to reach their potential, or they don't know how to handle their successes, or, right? So you will have groups of people that limit other human beings' human potential. Oh, hi, Adrian. Thanks for being in here. He says, we, the people, well, just my people, right? Adrian has a rules and laws theory that applies to transcendentalism, honestly, perfectly. So if you have a chance to put that in the chat, that would be great. So transcendence is the ability to stop seeking a higher authority, or to give in to power or give in to pressure. I usually phrase it in quit waiting for the hero, or nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to save you, right? So Transcendentalism is like, okay, I have to rise above. I have to go beyond. I have to see under the veil. I have to realize this is a matrix. Okay, now you see where it's fitting in with shadow work, right? um, because that the veil, the matrix, this weird society, that's full of propaganda and dogma only tells us what we are not, right? Because it's consistently putting burdens on people and limiting people's potential. Okay. Adric says, not seeking a hero. Yeah. I mean, and that's the things you have to realize you are your own hero. Okay, so Adrian's phrase that he says, white men have freedom and liberty, black men have rules and laws, right? So it always seems that way, like when we talk about freedoms and rights and liberties, it only applies to certain people. And when we're looking at laws and school to prison pipeline and incarceration rates and those kind of things, well, that's who the rules and laws. And then, when we also look at, we watch big court cases and stuff where young white men are on trial, and it seems like the book is never thrown at them. Okay. So 2 core beliefs. Okay. We're going to summarize them again. People are inherently good. Everyone deserves a chance to pursue self-fulfillment by focusing on the good they can do, their potential, right? And number 2, you have the right to find the truth by yourself and not by following the epiphany or story of somebody else. Because again, if you're just telling somebody about, somebody's just telling you about you, you are not discovering the truth about yourself. That's not authenticity. Now, some of it may like resonate and you feel like it applies and those kind of things, but no other person or people can speak the entire truth of you. They can only pick out a few things, right? So people are inherently good. Everybody deserves a chance to reach their potential. You have the right to find the truth by yourself and not by following what other people tell you you are supposed to be. Okay. All right. So, Adric, you says is in my honest opinion, but I'm not sure which comment you're saying that about. Maybe not seeking a hero. So George Hegel. I generally look at Hegel and Heidelman both when I'm talking about Jung. So, but George Hegel was a transcendentalist. He said that while he believed in the goodness of people and in universal freedom, he didn't completely open the door to like relativism, the purge, right? Because as you're hearing some of this, you're like, complete freedom? Because some people don't need complete freedom, right? Because there are people that if they are told that they get complete freedom, they're going to do ick. You know what I mean? It's going to be the purge if everybody gets complete freedom. So George Hegel, he's mixing some realism into the transcendentalism, right? So, he's saying, yeah, like I believe all people are like born good and there's inherent good in people, but I don't want the purge. Okay, so Hegel promoted reciprocal social obligations. Okay, so what he said was that we have an inherent obligation to respect other people's universal rights, right? So it's not just saying every single person has a universal right to freedom. He was saying that that has to be reciprocal, meaning if I have the universal right to freedom to reach my potential, then I have to ensure that you also have that universal freedom to reach your potential, right? So we while we're trying to be alone and reach our potential, we also have an obligation to make sure other people are as free to do that as possible. Yeah, Leanne was saying, so long as that freedom does not mess with me. Yeah, it's like generally people say, as long as you're not like hurting kids, abusing people, killing people, hurting animals, do whatever you got to do, right? Like just go do your thing, And so it's sort of like we throw in these qualifiers of, for instance, because, transcendentalism really came to life as they're developing this, and then they look over and they see enslaved people, and that really sparked them into action. you know where you can say that the white slave owner, we have to give him freedom to reach his potential, and sometimes we do things, other people do things that we don't necessarily agree with. Well, what this says is, no, we all have a societal obligation to be like, you can't infringe on these people's freedom in trying to, do whatever it is you're attempting to do. So there's these reciprocal obligations, right? So for you to get plenty of freedom, we all get plenty of freedom, right? Like it's not just me, everybody gets plenty of freedom, right? He said, because the other thing was, I was like, well, what do we do about crime, right? If everybody's just free, then what happens if? So that's why I liked Hegel, because he, again, was sparsing some realism in there. If we were all left to goodness from babies forward, then maybe all of, transcendentalism at its purest form would work. But because we've all been through stuff, you know what I mean? Like there are some people where they say hurt people, that kind of stuff. So, and we all know there are some people who are just selfish, icky people. Anyway, so he said if a crime is committed, then the crime needs to be canceled. And so this kind of cancel culture I like, right? So what that means is that the fair and equal punishment of the crime cancels the crime, is equal and balanced. Okay. So we don't have like records, you know what I mean? Like checking your background check and those kind of things, because again, there has to be freedom to continue to move forward and try to be good and reach your potential and all those kind of things. And if you have a record, something on your background check, then you can't be completely universally free, because that's going to follow you and it's going to hold you back. So, for instance, like if I stole an apple from somebody, then they get to come and get an orange from me, and then the crime is null and void. It's canceled. Okay. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not this, I smoked weed, and so I'm in prison for 10 years. First, not fair and equal, and then I also have a record. It's on my background check. You know what I'm saying? So this is more like fair and equal, and the crime is canceled. That we're not going to call that person a criminal or a thief or whatever. Once the punishment, that cancels it. It's canceled and it's done. Okay. So he said if somebody's right is violated, because again, it's easy to think of an example of stealing apples and oranges, but he said that if somebody's right is violated, then the right must be reasserted and its existence acknowledged. Okay. So this isn't just an apology. Okay. So it's like if a right is violated, then the person who violated the right has to make it right and has to announce that he violated that right, and that those people or that person inherently are owed that right. So it's sort of like that becomes kind of a moral thing. If I demoralize someone by taking away their right, then I have to kind of be shamed and knocked down a peg to reassert their right and make it right. Adric says, are people truly exonerated? Well, never. I mean, because they've either done time or, it's in the news. There's a record of the court hearing. Like, we are a very punitive society. So even when you get, just so you know, even when you get your record expunged, maybe you were exonerated for something, maybe something was thrown out, whatever. If you get your record expunged, it is not 100% expunged. The law enforcement and government officials still have access to your original record. So they will know what you were accused of, even if you were found not guilty or any of the, it's still there. We are a very punitive society, but kind of hearkening back to when you get a bunch of people together and they bond with each other over a certain ideal, they become toxic and terrible. Hi, Trust. Thanks for being in here. She says, unforgiving people. Yeah. Adric says, same with ACOD. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm making them sound like these guys are just, so amazing and so pure. But these were the original founders. So this is the heart of where it came from. But we also know of one who didn't entirely get on board. He got on board quite a bit, but didn't entirely get on board. I don't know if he was a product of his time or, what it was, but most of us have heard of Immanuel Kant. Okay. So Kant is a philosopher, and a lot of his philosophies are really, really well known. Oh, Adrian says punitive for some, we allow some boys to be boys. Yes, that is true. Yep. So, he wasn't the pure altruistic kind of kumbaya type of philosopher, at least to start. He eventually got much closer to that. So, if I was to give him any leeway, I would just say, he's got the freedom to find his potential to do good in this world. Now, was he doing bad things to other people? Not so much, but it was his philosophies. Okay. They weren't quite there. So Immanuel Kant was not really fair and balanced in his theory of race. So most everything, he's a transcendentalist purist. So his theory of race was that there are 4 base races, and that they all have a lineal root genus, which, by the way, we now know that we do, meaning that, all humanity can be traced back to, Central Africa, right? So humanity starts in Central Africa. So his theory way back when was that there are 4 races, and those 4 races can be traced back to a lineal root genus, and that original man was from Europe, not from Africa. So it's sort of like that assumption, still feeding into that stereotype of like white people are more advanced or more civilized or whatever. So he wasn't quite there. A lot of his other philosophies, though, were much better in being fair. And we did prove that there's a lineal root genus. It goes to Africa. Okay, so he had a way to go to transcend. He, because of his societal roots. I mean, in some ways, he's a bit of an example of how societal norms and societal thought actually infects people. And then, they're doing things maybe without thinking about it. I don't know. I didn't know the man. But transcendentalism at its root was about humanity, human beings, and that at our root, we're all just human beings, regardless of anything else. So how are we going to apply this to ourselves? Lawrence says, difficult to totally respect the laws when those authorized to enforce them don't. 100%. 100%. And again, those who enforce the laws are enforcing in they're a group, you know what I mean? And so they have their sicknesses, they have their infestations that they operate on. But then if they are operating on an immoral law or an immoral societal moray or norm, then it gets doubly and triply and exponentially worse by the time they enact, right? Because they're taking in all the different immoral or infectious nastiness from bigger groups, right? Until it gets to them. Um, so I guess, that's not an excuse by any means, by the way. Okay. Adrian Hicks says, then you shouldn't. We are citizens of the earth first. Yes. And that is where I'm going with this, is that I am, philosophically, I know this was a spiritual movement too, but philosophically, politically, I am a transcendentalist. I think you guys can look back at some of my videos and realize, right? Like the leave people alone and the earth wants you here. Those videos, right? Because we were all born here, right? We were born on a planet that created us, right? Like humans weren't here the moment that the earth was made. So, humans were here and humans survived for, it depends on who you ask, but I'm just going to say a million years because I have no idea. And it's a really long time. But humans survived for a million years just here on the earth, right? And thrived and grew and population and. You know what I mean? The earth just spontaneously produces food for us to eat. Water falls from the sky. You know what I mean? Like the earth has a symbiotic relationship with its humans. And if we had the freedom to just move about the earth and do the things, to try to be as good and reach our potential, things would be much better. Okay. I could get into a whole tirade, but just as an example of what I'm getting at. And this is public knowledge, by the way. You can pull up papers on this. The government, as they would clear out cities and whatnot to put in roads and big buildings and stuff like that, or they would put up freeways and highways and things like that, they were looking at what kind of plants and trees and stuff do they put in the city areas and like on the sides of the freeway and stuff like that. Like how do we do the gardening here? And the decision was made, and this is in a paper, again, this is explicitly them, that they would only plant male trees because they didn't want fruit-bearing or nut-bearing trees to just be out there where people could get free food. Now, it is still done to this day. By the way, they only plant male trees, so that way you don't have you could have a male apple tree and you wouldn't know unless you knew that it's an apple tree right outside your office building or whatever. Because they won't have the female trees because the female trees produce free food. Okay, and think about homeless people are very collected into city centers, right? And how different would it be if they just planted trees that had free fruit and nuts? There's, they also don't want to clean it up. Like that's free food. So that messes with the grocer and all these other people who are making money off of hoarding food. But also, you got to clean it up when it rots and falls off, right? Nina says you're talking my language. Yeah. So that's just one example of the tirade I could get on, right? Because, we're also told you have to drink water that's been distilled, 47 different ways. Has anybody ever thought like, you can only eat this food and it has to come from here and, then this has caused cancer? And has anybody ever thought, well, how the hell did we survive? Right? Did we just drink mead and beer and fermented things? Like, how did we ever survive? And then when you realize you could drink out of the creeks and the rivers and oh, what is it called when the water is melting off of mountains, right? People in Colorado still, by the way, do that. They've set up fountains where you can just go fill them up, and it's the water that comes off the mountain, and it's like crystal clear, has great minerals, is so good for you. We could drink all that stuff until it was just polluted by, greedy people. And, our ground has been raked and doesn't just spontaneously grow things like it used to. And they've taken away all the female trees. So this is where I'm going with, transcendentalism says, hey, we're all supposed to be here. We don't have another planet we can just go to. We should be allowed to be free, like grow our own food and grab some water. But it's gotten worse and worse. This kind of a transcendentalist nightmare because everything is regulated, everything is constrained, and we've limited everybody's human potential. Nobody's really free at this point. Adric says, some ordinances restrict growing food on your own property. Yes. And those are getting stricter and stricter. And think about all of the laws where, so there's two that I think about a lot. And one is that you can't have like a farmer's market without getting a license and paying sales tax. They're going to get theirs, right? And it also has to be in a place that they approve. So they don't really do that. And number two, most all cities have laws that you can't give away food. It is illegal to give away food. So even if like my garden produced a big yield and I just decided, on the way into work, I know where a vast majority of the homeless are at that time of the morning. I could just be dropping off stuff with them from the garden that is illegal, and I would be arrested. So societal illnesses, you see what I'm saying? So how are we, wouldn't want healthy people now, would we? Oh, I mean, the thing is, they want you to pay for it. They want you to pay for food that spontaneously springs from the earth on its own, but they want you to pay for it. Okay. And pay the sales tax and the state tax and the federal tax and pay all the taxes all the time. Do that too. All right. So how are we applying this to ourselves? So first is, I'm saying individualism. I think individualism can get toxic in and of itself because it gets a bit narcissistic and like myopic. I can only see me and I'm the most important thing, blah, 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 blah. We live in a very individualistic society where we have forgotten about reciprocal societal contracts. I'm saying individualism in the form of authenticity, like being an individual, being authentic, right? That is the first step to transcending all the illness and ick that's going on. The second one is believing that there may be a reality that exists outside of our senses. So there's something that helps us transcend. So whether you want to believe in God or spiritual things or your own soul, your own spirit, stuff like that, that there is something outside of what I can see, taste, hear, touch, all of that, that helps me to transcend. And maybe it's sort of like that belief in that people are inherently good or like born good, that belief is outside of me. I can't perceive that. It's something that you would have faith in, okay? Utilizing your personal intuition. The Transcendentalists were big on that. If your gut tells you something, listen. Very big on, and respecting each other's personal intuition. So, if a couple of transcendentalists walked in a room and one of them's like, nope, vibes off, something bad's getting ready to happen, they would both turn around and walk out. The end. So trust your personal intuition. Oh, Adric says, lastly, possibility restricting seed sharing. Oh, yeah. And do you know that, I don't know how it is right this minute, this particular day, but very, very, very recently, I'm talking within months, I was trying to buy seeds that would regerminate every year, right? Like I want to plant carrots and just the carrots come back up every year. And you can't buy those in the United States. And the seeds that you can buy in the United States are all GMO. So they're all genetically modified. They're not like natural. So to buy those seeds, you have to get them outside of the United States. Well, when you buy seeds from outside of the United States, customs doesn't allow a vast majority of them to come in. So, I mean, you almost have to go on this like adventure to try to figure out where to get natural seeds. Isn't that crazy? Like the natural seeds. And what people have started noticing too, how like if you eat a carrot and then you take the top of the carrot and you plant it, it will eventually grow roots and grow a whole new carrot. Like a lot of people know that. Or like green onions, you can do it with that. Regular, white onions, you can do them. Potatoes, those kind of things. A lot of people are starting to notice that our produce is so genetically modified that they've stopped germinating on their own. That they try to repopulate their celery and nothing happens. So yes, restricting seed sharing is huge. Freedom from mindless social conventions. So just because society in some group in society said that this is how we behave, this is how we act, this is our social convention, this is our norm, this is how we are, or we don't do this, that if it is mindless and it's not to your benefit, get free from it. You don't need it, right? That kind of leans into propaganda, dogma, stereotypes, those kind of things. Like all of that is mindless, and we just need to be free from that. Kind of sinking into what is simple. If people are making things way too complicated, if it's just mindlessly confusing, those kind of things, enjoy simplicity. Now, we all live in this society, right? And so we got to get involved because, again, we have reciprocal society contracts. So when people are doing things that restricts the universal freedoms of other people who are not harming anyone, then we got to get involved, which means we got to get into the complicated, the confusing on purpose, the conflated, all of that. But then we come back to finding something simple, something that is mindful, being present in the moment, going for a walk, getting some fresh air, getting in the sunshine, spending some time with a pet or with a child or with somebody you love, singing a song, getting into those things to kind of refill our spirit for all of the work we got to do on the other side. Leon said, these are our values. I love that. Which I mean, I would, because philosophically I'm a transcendentalist. So I wish it was a political party. Wouldn't that be great? All right. And then the last one, how are we applying transcendentalism to ourselves, is overarchingly connecting with what is natural. Okay. So that is nature, and that's also where simplicity is, and where we go for a walk and we get sunshine, and we try to eat healthy food, and what nature and what is natural is a way to transcend, right? Like being mindful in nature and enjoying what is natural, also protecting what is natural, those kind of things. That all applies to transcendentalism. All right. We're just under an hour, so I'm actually not going to do a panel. I'm so sorry, Leon. I know that you can't do my panels on Sunday. At some point, I'm going to switch them so that you can come up. Dang it. Or I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed that you have a Sunday off. So we're too close to an hour. So what I will leave you with, again, because Ralph Waldo Emerson was a literary genius and one of the founders of Transcendentalism, he has the best, most perfect quote that I want to oh, Leon, see, I was building up to this perfect quote, and then you had to say you're the lame bonus weekend money man. You should write a song about that. You sneak away for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this. As Ralph Waldo Emerson eloquently put it, trust thyself. I hope everybody has a great Wednesday. This coming Sunday, we're going to talk about that nobody cares about your existential crisis. So we're going to talk about existential crisis. And we're going to get into some deep stuff on Sunday. Different ways to look at this matrix to see it for what it is. So hope you guys can be there. The Wednesday after that, we're going to get into a little bit of the philosopher Deleuze, Deleuze. I'm excited about that. So if I don't see you Sunday, hope I see you guys Wednesday. Have a good rest of your Wednesday. Thanks. Bye.